trying to get my breath, Commissioner.
Yes, drink some water, Sia. Drink some water.
A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It was always going to be difficult. I think, Commissioner, we overcommitted ourselves. But who are we to complain? Because all of the issues that we are dealing with are matters of national interest. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Siyabulela Makunga. I am the spokesperson for the Competition Commission of South Africa. Commissioner Doris Tepe has sanctioned this media briefing for one reason and one reason only: the release of the much anticipated provisional report of the media and digital platforms market inquiry, which was established in September 2023. Am I right, James?
Started in October.
In October. In terms of Section 43B of the Competition Act, which empowers the Commission and the Minister to establish an inquiry where a need has been established, but also to see if there are any features of the particular market or a particular market that impedes, distort, or prevent a competition in the sector. So when we established this inquiry, the main purpose really was to see if there are any features that may prevent or impede competition in the sector, especially in the media space, obviously taking cognizance of the evolution of the media landscape. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I do wish, Commissioner, before I introduce the panel, to acknowledge that we do have in our midst the delegation, a very senior delegation from our stakeholders, the key stakeholders in the media sector. I've seen on my left Bongani Skoko from Sunday Times. I know SANEF is here. I also know that AIP is also represented. These are the people, Commissioner, that have made this work quite easy for us by making very pointed submissions in terms of their experiences of how this evolution has impacted the sector. I see Bramzi from the independent media. I have a very personal issues on this with regards to Bramzi. Bramzi and I, we met when I was an activist communicator at the South African Student Press Union back in 2001. He was leading the tour at the time. I think it was Avusa Media, if not mistaken, Bramzi. I'm very happy to see you, that you are still one of the, I'll call it torch bearers in as far as ensuring that media freedom remains one of the important elements of the sector. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I now wish to introduce our panel. On my immediate right is the Commissioner for Competition, Commissioner Doris Tepe. And obviously sitting on my far right is the chairperson of the market inquiry on the media, digital platforms, James Hodge. Is also the chief economist of the Commission and the acting deputy commissioner for the Commission. I know that our expert panelist was not able to join us in person. Is she here? Oh, she's on the line. Oh, wonderful. Paula Frey, who I know is no stranger in the media sector. I know Paula is going to fight with me when I refer to her as a living treasure of the media sector. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I now wish to invite Commissioner Doris Tepe to lead us with the opening remarks. Commissioner, do you want to speak from the podium?
If it's fine to... the mics. The mics, okay.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sia.
First, good morning, colleagues. It's an absolute pleasure to have you all here. As Sia said, let's first apologize for starting late. We had to be at a media briefing on the update on the implementation of the health market inquiry following the release of the draft block exemption on the health sector. So we had to move from OR Tambo International Airport to be here quickly. Yes, I am short. Yes, thank you. So it's an absolute pleasure to have you all here as we launch, as the Competition Commission launches the Media and Digital Platform Market Inquiry. And this launch, as we all know, it's happening in the context of a media sector that has been under severe financial strain following the digitization of news consumption globally, but South Africa has not been spared. Whilst the shift to online consumption has brought its own challenges, the inquiry was initiated to determine whether conduct by search and social media platforms that compete for digital advertising and play an intermediary role may be exacerbating the difficulties faced by the news media due to the adverse effects on competition or inequitable bargaining position. We all know that there's been initiatives around the world around media bargaining with digital platforms in other jurisdictions. In this inquiry, we have sought to be a little more inclusive and to some extent a bit ambitious in what the terms of reference sought to include. We have included radio and TV broadcasters, both commercial and public or community, the impact of AI chatbots and AI-powered search, and the ad tech industry, which, as we know, affects the monetization of traffic on news websites. The inquiry is also unique in that, as we know, the media are key agents in the fulfillment of constitutional rights to freedom of expression, and whose work promotes the fulfillment of numerous other constitutional rights. As the digital platforms do not create content themselves, any undue harm to the news media would undermine the fulfillment of these constitutional rights. We all know that the Constitution, particularly Section 39(2) of the Constitution, requires that when interpreting any law, including the Competition Act, we need to make sure that we do so to promote the spirit, purport, and object of the Bill of Rights. This is the context within which the Media Digital Platform Market Inquiry was initiated. Indeed, one of the reasons for prioritizing this market inquiry was the importance of preserving a strong independent media with a diversity and plurality of voices to strengthen our democracy. The inquiry has been mandated to consider the constitutional implications of its findings as part of the effects assessment and to consider the effect on media diversity and plurality, including the role played by the public broadcaster. The inquiry went out through a number of rounds of information requests, and this is the process that we followed to all stakeholders prior to holding public hearings in March 2024. These were extensive public information requests, which were then followed by extensive participation by South Africa's mainstream media, including community media, vernacular media, radio and television broadcasters, including the public broadcaster and community broadcasters. Some of the largest global search and social media platforms who are also at the forefront of AI, ad tech companies and ad brokers and media association, including think tanks and academics, also participated in these processes. These hearings were followed by a further information request and in-camera hearings, which included both TikTok and X, which were absent from public hearings. In-camera hearings are critical in that in some instances, participants may want to be presenting some of their confidential information that cannot be presented in public hearings, and hence the ability to collate all the information we require. Further information requests followed the in-camera hearings before the drafting of the provisional report. Following the release of the provisional report, which we're doing today, stakeholders and the public have 6 weeks to make submissions to the market inquiry on the provisional findings and remedies, followed by a further period of further evidence gathering and engagements by the inquiry in response to any of those submissions that we may receive in response to the provisional findings and the provisional remedial actions or recommendation. The inquiry then aims to produce a final report in the next 4 to 5 months following these submissions. So what I would like to do right now is to thank the panel, the technical team, for all the hard work that has gone into reaching this stage of producing the provisional report. As Sia has already stated, the panel consists of the chairperson, which in the form of an acting deputy commissioner. As you know, the Act requires that the chairperson of a market inquiry must be a deputy commissioner. In this case, it's James Hodge, who's also the chief economist of the Competition Commission. Another panel member who does not require any introduction is media stalwart, Ms. Paula Frey, who's joining us online, who unfortunately could not be with us today physically. But we thank you, Paula, for making the time to join us virtually. The technical team, which I'm going to ask if they could all come up so we can give them a round of applause. It is led by Nolutando Jokazi, Donovan Lenley, Patuchezu Manenze, and they are ably supported by Apiwe Nanto, Kuhle Majola, Chandre Prince, Lumkisa Jordan, Sivuyise Mtiki, Mbali Masango, Ezile Njisani, and Ntwanano Chauke, along with a number of cadets who are interns and graduate trainees in the Commission. I would like to take this opportunity then to hand over to Paula, who will then take us through the findings, and then James will take us through the remedial action. But before doing so, I think we should give this team a very good round of applause. Thank you, guys. Your job is really appreciated. So I would now hand over to Paula, who would then take us through the draft findings of the provisional report, and that will be followed by James, who would discuss the proposed remedial action and some of the recommendation being made. As I said, what is then required is a consultation process will follow from here, where all stakeholders will then make submissions to the market inquiry, who will then consider those before publishing the final report. Thank you. Yes, you can clap for me.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And also, thank you very much to the panel chair, James Hodge, and the technical team who have driven this process. So I'm going to do the findings, and then, as you heard, the chair will take us through the recommended remedial actions. I just hope that the internet is good and that you can hear me. But if anything, let me know, and I'll pause. I want to start off by saying it's widely acknowledged that the news media plays a vital role in upholding the right to freedom of expression and strengthening democracy by informing the public and holding institutions accountable. It is equally acknowledged that South Africa's news media faces significant financial challenges as the shift to online consumption has led to a decline in traditional advertising revenue, the primary source of funding for journalism. 87% of the population now get their news online, mostly through their mobile phones. Intermediaries such as search and social media platforms have become primary sources of news for most people, hosting news content produced by the media and not news videos preferred by the youth over text are mostly watched on the social media platforms and not on news websites. The shift online has seen a massive decline in traditional advertising revenue sources of around 40% for major print publications. Broadcasters are not immune to this trend, and the SABC ad revenue declined 47% from its peak. The news media has been unable to replace this lost revenue with digital ad revenue, as the losses are 4 to 5 times the gains in digital revenue. This is partly due to greater digital ad inventory and lower ad rates, but it also because news is increasingly consumed through the search and social media intermediaries which dominate digital advertising. AI bots, chatbots, will represent a new intermediary threat to the news media. While the news media must rise through the challenges presented by this disruption, the inquiry finds that the conduct of the digital platforms have exacerbated the predicament of the news media by reducing referral traffic and also increase the costs of the news industry by requiring the media to produce digital content in the format of the platforms, optimized continually to changing algorithms and addressing the misinformation that proliferates on social media. Many in the mainstream media have responded by seeking to grow non-advertising revenue, particularly through paywall content to drive subscriptions. This has also been the model of the largest global media companies. Other sources include donations, content licensing and syndication, branded events, and affiliate marketing for the majority of South Africans given their low incomes. This model is therefore not viable for the public broadcaster, vernacular and community media that serve this. The threat to advertising as a revenue source is therefore a threat to access to news and media diversity and plurality. The subscription model lends itself to a winner-takes-most outcome that will further concentrate news in an already concentrated South African news industry. The impact of this shift and the conduct of the platforms is evident in the news today. Journalism numbers have halved from their peak, with an increased casualization of journalists that remain, along with the juniorization of newsrooms. Many bureaus have closed of news from secondary cities and rural areas. Many community and regional papers have shut down entirely. As the media is a public good, promoting democracy by keeping the population informed and holding institutions to account, the rapid decline of the media has severe consequences for our democracy and the constitutional rights of citizens. This decline will not be addressed by the platforms that currently benefit from news content, as they do not produce the content themselves. Let's move to search. The inquiry has heard considerable debate on the value of news content to search engines. It is apparent that the value exceeds simply the ads served against news queries, which is small. The value of a search engine is based on its ability to respond authoritatively to all queries, which habituates users to start with the search engine, even if only a small proportion of commercial queries generate the bulk of the revenue. In this way, search engines compete to win commercial search revenues from specialist search sites. The evidence indicates that news is an important use case for search and has been used extensively for building the personalized feeds or queryless search that are now a feature of search engines such as Google Discover. This includes the data collection to drive the feed. The evidence also indicates that users consume news on the search engine results page or click through to YouTube for news videos, resulting in less than half the news queries, resulting in clicks to news websites that generate revenue for the news media. The inquiry has done an extensive exercise to estimate the value to both Google and the news media from the relationship. The news media benefit from referral traffic estimated at circa 200 million in 2023, whereas Google benefits from content to respond to news queries, which consist of total queries, and hence the total value of approximately 800 to 900 million. Google also destroys about 160 to 280 million in potential value for the media with queries that result in 0 clicks to their website. Our assessment is that the imbalance in the share of total value is circa 300 to 500 million annually. The inquiry has identified evidence of bias in the Google algorithm that disadvantages South African media in general or segments of the media. This is determined where the relative share of impressions is much higher than the relative click-through rate on those impressions. On this measure, Google has a bias towards foreign media over South African media and towards YouTube-hosted videos over website-hosted videos. It is generally accepted that search is poor in generating impressions for vernacular. Labeled media has a distinct advantage over ad-based media, as the fact that a non-subscriber will bounce back is not factored into the search algorithm. AI-powered search with AI some new distinct threat to the media as it will decline, further eroding the benefit of the media gets from search in exchange for the use of its content. There is no means to opt out of AI summaries because it is tied to search indexing, which the news media cannot opt out of, as it would eliminate all search traffic. Moving on to social media, despite social media platforms seeking to downplay the role of news on their platforms, the evidence before the inquiry is unequivocal that a majority of South African consumers use social media as their primary source of news. This is confirmed by our own inquiry survey and the Reuters survey, with the majority of users indicating that they actively go to social media for news due to the convenience and would spend less time on the platform were news not there. YouTube actively promotes itself as a destination for news content with a range of news packages, while Meta is the platform most used for news, with tens of millions of people actively following news and journalist pages. X has always been the destination for breaking news and public debate, while news is increasingly being consumed on TikTok as the platform grows and matures. South African consumers and some platforms see the presence of credible news on the platform as reducing the spread of misinformation on social media. Social media platforms monetize by selling user attention to advertisers through promoted posts. They collect extensive user data, including psychometric insights, to enable highly targeted advertising. Engagement is crucial for monetization as it generates ad data for ad targeting and increases user activity, which expands advertising inventory. Social media differs from search insofar as the platform determines what people see in their feed rather than responding to user queries. Despite the importance of news for South African users and for countering misinformation, Meta has deliberately deprecated credible news content on its platform, along with posts and links to websites, effectively eliminating half of the media's referral traffic in the past few years. This has had a particularly harmful effect on vernacular and community media, which is consumed on social media rather than search. X has similarly reduced visibility for posts, with links causing referral traffic to drop. For YouTube, the video is watched on the app, and so what matters is how the media can monetize that view. While YouTube shares in-video ad revenue, its dominance means that the share is uncompetitive and the eligibility criteria excludes most news media. As a result, the news earns very little for billions of views. As social media content comes from user posts, it has been a source of harmful content and misinformation. While all platforms do put effort into removing harmful content and containing misinformation, platforms like Meta have historically promoted content generating engagement, which resulted in more sensationalist, controversial, and false information on the platform. More recently, X abandoned traditional fact-checking for community enforcement by the users to cut down costs with known consequences of more misinformation on the platform. Meta is using community notes in the US. Best practice has been to not amplify misinformation, but fewer platforms are now following this approach. In generative AI, the inquiry focused on two main issues, namely the use of media content for training AI models and for chatbot news summaries in response to user queries. On training, the evidence is clear that media content plays an outsized role in training based on the share of content in training datasets used and the growing number of AI company deals, organizations focused on access to training data. South African media content has been used, albeit it has been a small fraction historically. But the search for more training are an important use case for AI chatbots as these serve a search-like purpose. This is evident from the inquiry survey where many respondents are already using chatbots for news and the majority would do so in future. But also AI companies are doing global media deals that aim to ground responses to news queries. AI tools are also offering daily news summaries. Evidence and the refusal to provide data indicates AI summaries reduce referral traffic, harming the media excluded from content deals. There is a strong risk that selective deals with global media to reduce litigation risk will exclude all or most South African and independent media, exacerbating the winner takes all, the winner takes most outcomes. The exclusion results in no compensation for the use of copyrighted content for training or summaries and the likelihood of even deeper cuts in referral traffic as contracted media partner content is preferred. Most South African media have not stopped AI crawlers scraping their content for summaries or training. This is because the media must opt out rather than opt in, and there is a lack of education around AI content scraping. It is also because AI draw on Google and Microsoft search indexes to source current news content, and there is no real option to opt out of those for fear of losing traffic. For ad tech is used by the media to monetize digital traffic to their websites and advertisers to place ads across digital content. The competition in the ad tech market affects fees and the share of advertising spend that reaches the media and practices that advantage programmatic advertising. Evidence indicates that Google is super dominant across ad tech. achieved through acquisitions and entrenchment practices that favor its ad tech part over rivals. On the publisher side of the market, there is strong incentive to use Google Ad Manager, or for the smaller sites and apps, Google AdMob or AdSense, as these attract the vast majority of ad spend from Google Ads and DV360, which dominate the advertiser side of the market. On those ad servers, the vast majority of programmatic sales take place through Google Ad Exchange because it's the default. It has pre-access to the highest bid of rival exchanges, and rivals are taxed at 5 to 10% by Google Ad Server. On the advertiser side, DV360 has exclusive access to the must-have YouTube content, and along with Google Ads, benefits from data sharing across Google platforms and ad tech. In contrast, little information is shared with the news media, which compete against programmatic for direct sales. In terms of outcomes, currently the media only get 60% of programmatic ad spend after ad tech and agency fees, and direct sales have fallen to circa 50 to 60%. Fees are unlikely to be competitive, and the ad tech has a data advantage over direct sales by the media. Apart from English and now Afrikaans, advertising copy in local languages on Google Ad Tech is not supported. I'm going to pause there and hand over to the chair, James Hodge, to take us through remedial actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ospola. Ladies and gentlemen, I could not stop Ospola because I thought it was important that we give the opportunity, having made this arrangement, for the benefit of all of us. But I can assure the media that we are going to be circulating the presentation for all the three speakers at a later stage, so you will have the benefit of the contents, having had these glitches that we are profusely apologizing for. Ladies and gentlemen, what is to be done? Obviously, these are provisional proposals and remedies that James is going to take us through, which obviously will be a subject of consultations for the Commission before we release the final report. James, over to you.
Thank you, Sia, and thanks everyone for coming to the launch. I mean, as Sia has indicated, these are provisional and will be subject to submissions. And as the history of inquiries at the Commission has shown, we'll also engage parties after we get those submissions, ask for more evidence where required, and see whether one can find common ground on remedial actions that can resolve what may be common cause problems across, in this case, the media. As a starting point, media bargaining has been used in other jurisdictions, notably in Australia and Canada, and it's been used ostensibly to address some of these issues. But I think, as we're all aware, that model now faces considerable challenges. Meta has shut down news in response in Canada, and Google payments have mostly benefited the mainstream media. They're also, in a sense, not addressing the core issues that result in the imbalance in value, and those findings Paula has just provided. So in this context, the inquiry has taken a slightly different approach. It's looked to find longer-term solutions that are win-win and hence more sustainable to support the media alongside the short-term measures to address the current state of the media, which is a product in large respects of historic conduct by the platforms as well. At this stage, we focus predominantly on outcomes that we would like to see rather than dictating how those may be achieved. This is a very dynamic sector, and our previous engagements and experience from the online intermediation inquiry is that rather focusing on outcomes allows that flexibility and dynamism for the platforms to respond to changes in the market or consumer behavior while still achieving the outcomes we want. Absent any win-win solutions finding traction with the digital stakeholders, the only alternative that we can see is to impose a 5 to 10% digital levy or tariff on search, social media, and AI companies to compensate the media. So that is, in a sense, a fallback position if we don't see the cooperation around particular remedies. I'm just going to highlight some of the key revenues. This is an incredibly technical area, and there are numerous remedies you'll see in the provisional report, but I'll just focus on some of the key ones for now. So in terms of search, if we are going to look for a longer-term sustainable remedy to address this imbalance in value between what Google gets and what the media gets in referral traffic, then the search design and algorithm choices of Google and in future Microsoft Bing that reduce referral traffic to the SA media has to be addressed in order to ensure that they can monetize their content. And monetizing it on the media's websites is preferred to getting a share of monetization on the platforms often because the media can get much higher rates for that traffic compared to what they get out of the digital platforms. So in order to do this, we propose that there are long-term solutions that are put in place over the next 3 years that remove the algorithm biases that Paul has mentioned, that take traffic from South African media to foreign media and take traffic to YouTube, and also building traffic for vernacular and community media. It is also proposed that once that traffic is sent, the media is more able to monetize that at much higher rates with better user data. So we're proposing that there's far more extensive anonymized user data to be shared by search engines to enable improved monetization by the media, and also dedicated support, particularly from Google, to the news media for search engine optimization, where they can prevent traffic loss ahead of time with major core updates. But these changes will take time to put in place, and the practices that need to be reversed have been in place for some time. And that has placed the media in a financial position of distress. So the inquiry does propose short-term compensation from Google for the South African media in the range that Paula indicated of that imbalance in value, which is 300 to 500 million for a 3 to 5 year period. That is at the expense of the media currently, and I apologize, the slide earlier had the wrong number, but that is the proposal, 300 to 500 million. And to prevent this simply rewarding the incumbents, it is proposed that the fund is dispensed based not only on content volume and digital content volume, but also need and contribution to media diversity. It also must include the public broadcaster. Whilst we note that Google has done a 3-year deal with the Association of Independent Publishers, we think the value of that deal needs to be revisited in line with this recommendation. In addition to all of this, Google and also social media platforms, when I come to them, should contribute to the oversight institutions that are funded by the media and are threatened by the financial position of the media. On AI-powered search, it is proposed that Google and Microsoft offer the ability to opt out of AI summaries and support a program to educate and assist the media to consciously opt out if they wish to. We heard in the public hearings that, in particular, smaller media simply do not have the technical skills and wherewithal to actively opt out. And so if we are to operate an opt-out model, we need to educate and provide that technical support. But where the media does opt in, the design choices of AI search going forward must ensure that referral traffic is not eroded. We're also proposing an exemption for the media to enable collective engagement with search engines over future issues that are likely to arise, or to secure an agreement prior to the completion of the inquiry and the final report, if they so wish. On social media, again, the inquiry view is that a win-win outcome in social media also involves rebuilding referral traffic that the media can monetize on their own websites. This can be corrected quickly as well. So it is proposed that Meta cease deliberately suppressing South African news content and reverse the algorithm changes to boost referral traffic by at least 100%, but in particular to the peak of referral traffic that the media once enjoyed. As Paula set out, that has halved in just the last few years. Meta and X also to cease the deprioritization of posts with links to enable the media to post and get reach into their followers with those and get the referral traffic. Video content is different because it is viewed on the platform, be it YouTube or TikTok or even Facebook. And so it removes the options to generate referral traffic. And so our focus has been for video to look at how do you monetize better on those platforms. So for YouTube, it's proposed that the YouTube Partner Program is extended to all the media in South Africa, despite the eligibility criteria they currently impose, and that the revenue share is increased to 70% from the current 55%. But also look at strategies to boost direct sales where the media is able to get a far higher fee than what they can get on YouTube. Meta is also to follow suit, opening up its video program that helps share monetize ads on in-video ads, and also increases its revenue share on its video revenue sharing program. We also propose, as with search, that social media provides greater anonymized user data to the news media and also supports the oversight institutions along with digital literacy programs, including children literacy programs as well. The inquiry is of the view that misinformation is probably best addressed through regulation, and for this reason it recommends that the Electronic Communications and Transactions Act is amended to introduce liability for platforms where they post harmful content or where they amplify misinformation. And amplification is really putting it on the user feed or allowing it to reach followers of individuals that have large followings. But also that the social media platforms adopt content policies that seek to achieve this as well. The inquiry does propose that the social media platforms, which often partner with the media around elections, do so beyond elections and continuously and compensate the media for the fact-checking, which imposes a cost on the media. In terms of generative AI, what we are seeing globally is that commercial solutions are emerging through the media deals that the AI companies are doing for training data and also to help them respond to news queries. And this can resolve many of the issues that AI presents, because if there are content deals, then the media is compensated for its content used for training and responding to queries. So what we are proposing is that the media gets an exemption to collectively negotiate these, and also a number of other measures to incentivize AI companies to deal with the media by taking away some of the alternatives of getting this content and using this content. So 2 measures in order to incentivize AI companies to deal with the media. The first would be to ensure that AI companies cannot just scrape the information. And there the inquiry is proposing that the crawlers that permit an opt-out for AI summaries that is separate to search. As Paula indicated, these are often linked, which means you can't opt out of AI summaries. So separate opt-out provisions for that. And again, that the AI companies, like the search companies, engage in a program to educate and facilitate South African media to opt out of AI training or summaries where they wish to. Also to ensure that AI companies don't preference global media partner content over South African media content, where they've taken the approach of selectively picking up global media, in part to avoid litigation. Then measures must be taken, the inquiry recommends measures must be taken in the chatbot design to ensure that the partner content is not overrepresented and that significant referral traffic is provided. Again, as with search and social media, the fallback on AI is if there is no resolution around this, to implement a digital levy or tax of 5 to 10%. On ad tech, the structural dominance of Google suggests that a breakup might resolve many issues. But I think the inquiry has realized that this is not practical for South Africa alone. If that were to happen, we're unlikely to find a buyer, and we're unlikely to find other global ad tech companies engaging in changes to take advantage of that. But it is under consideration in the US and the EU. And so if this does occur in those markets, then the inquiry proposes that any structural remedy, if it surfaces in the US or EU, is applied to South Africa too. Some of the entrenchment strategies have been addressed in the EU already, but they've not been rolled out globally. And so the inquiry proposes that those are now applied to South Africa. It's an easy remedy for Google to implement because they've done it in the EU. This includes the price transparency and remedies in respect to the favorable treatment of Google's own ad exchange, such as the additional fees that are imposed on others that Paula highlighted. In addition, the inquiry proposes, given the structural issues, a reduction in fees on direct sales and an end to exclusive contracts for YouTube inventory for Google's DV360. That was proposed by Google in the EU as a potential remedy, and we think it can assist in, amongst other remedies, to address that structural dominance. And it is proposed that all advertising copy in local languages is permitted on Google Ad Tech. So either they can stop policing ad copy, or they should develop the language skills to address that ability to do so. Lastly, just on government and business, the media has brought to the inquiry a range of other potential measures that could be implemented by business or government. I think it was under the auspices of a more holistic approach that addressing the digital side is one thing, but because we've also got a disruptive structural change to online consumption, that broader support is required. And some of the proposals were tax breaks for journalists, for investment in the media, for donations, subscriptions, etc., and also committed ad spend. It was noted that the government had committed 30% of ad spend to community media, but was not implementing that. But committed ad spend need not be limited to government. It can also extend to business as well. So we do agree that these are important as part of our holistic solutions. But at this stage, we would only be in a position to make recommendations, not binding remedies. And so from our perspective, there's no reason to stop these engagements moving ahead. And some of those items have been put on the agenda, we're aware, with GCIS, but also the media can use its organizations to take it forward with business and other parts of government. And I think that's partly because of the urgency. There's no need to delay these sort of initiatives. But to assist, we are recommending that exemptions are provided, but also exemptions for industry to establish a collective industry fund that could take donations and disperse it to its members, and for community media to collectively sell national advertising. As the Commissioner indicated, and Sia also indicated, these are provisional, only based on provisional findings. And the purpose of putting out the report is to get those submissions and get that engagement. Certainly our experience from the previous inquiries has been that this engagement is invaluable. It has resulted in changes in findings or changes in remedies. And certainly the inquiry team is open-minded to evidence and argument. But there is also no reason for some of the remedial initiatives to wait for the final report if the media or the digital platforms either reach agreement or the digital platforms seek to preemptively implement. We've seen that already with Google and the AIP deal, and certainly we're not going to stand in the way of those while we look to finalize the report. Lastly, I would just say we would encourage as much public debate, and obviously the media plays a critical role in that public debate and around this report, given the consequences for the media and the constitutional rights of citizens as well. Even if it's just highlighting how people are consuming news, the way they're doing it may be prejudicing the news media itself. I think all of that discussion and public debate is really welcome at this stage. So thank you, Sia. That's the remedies.
Thank you very much, James. Ladies and gentlemen, I do wish to request you once again to give us a round of applause for the in-depth work that we have done in this area of national interest. James and the technical team, I do wish to invite everyone in the room to give this team a round of applause. Commissioner, we do not have enough time to acknowledge all our stakeholders, but I do think it's important that I recognize one of the senior reporters, Fariel Hafaji. I know Arena Holdings is also represented by Robin Whitley and Putpule Moli Bade. I'm so sorry. I tried. SABC is also here. Patrick Mpila from the SABC, the national broadcaster, is also here. I know that we've got James, the Department of Communication, Ms. Makwetu Nondombi. I do not see you. Yeah, she's here. She will definitely make sure that the regulator, our counterparts in the communication space, do receive a report, the provisional report, which obviously foregrounds the discussions, further discussions and consultations that will be taking place in the next few months. At this juncture, ladies and gentlemen, I do wish to request questions from the members of the media only. Stakeholders, there will be obviously the follow-up engagements, as you are aware. There's also an opportunity to submit clarity-seeking questions from this report, James. I hope that is correct. Obviously, as part of the consultations and engagements processes. So I'm going to open for questions from the members of the media. I'm noting you as number one. We do have colleagues, Fariel, you number two, on the YouTube channel. We are streaming live. This is a hybrid event. I've seen about 116 viewers before I took over the podium. So this is really a matter that has been receiving an increasing anticipation, especially from the members of the media. So you're my number one, you're number two, Fariel. Who's next, colleagues, in this first round of questions? Oh, Katlego will be number three. Please proceed.
Thank you. My name is Willie Strydom from Betweenity. Thank you. Willie Strydom from Betweenity. My question is whether the purpose of the remedies is basically to restore fairness, plus minus let's say a pre-digital era fairness, or whether they also aim to create lower barriers to entry into the media space. In other words, if the whole issue regarding the constitutional issues that are implicated as a result of media becoming weaker and weaker as a result of digital, whether that is also a particular goal in relation to the remedies, or whether it's only to restore fairness. Thank you.
Thank you, Odi. Fariel?
Fariel Hafaji from the Daily Maverick. Thank you very much, Sia, for your words and for the report. It's a brave and radical report, and it's built, but it is built on a burning platform. The context has changed substantially, where tech companies are now under significant attack, and tech companies are supported by the US new administration, who has made threatening sounds against the EU for trying to regulate. Have you assessed the risks of this? And just for clarity, is it a carrot and stick approach? So 300 to 500 million now and a levy, or if you make that payment and negotiate, then you don't pay the levy? Thank you very much.
Katlego, you've got the mic.
Katlego Logodi from the SABC. I just wanted to get a distinction between large media houses and small media houses in terms of the remedies. Is it going to be the same approach, let's say for a media house that is a giant in this space compared to a smaller radio station or a newspaper that would more or less be in dire need compared to the large media house? And as well, you're saying that these are not binding recommendations. So when can we see perhaps, the recommendations being binding? How are you actually looking to move, around that or work yourself around that if there is an organization here that would not hit to some of these remedial actions that you have presented? Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Before I allow the panel to respond, is there an appetite from the colleagues to just take this window of opportunity so that we round it off? Oh, you've got other questions from online? Is it on? Oh.
You guys hear me now?
Yeah,
Great.
yeah. Thank you so much.
This is a question from Lise from Mail and Guardian. She asks, She firstly asks, how likely is it that Google, Meta, YouTube, X, and other platforms will voluntarily comply with the proposals of the Commission? And how soon would you like to see this happening? Second part to that question is, have any of these companies indicated a willingness to cooperate with the Commission? Thank you.
For the benefit of the media, it is important to introduce my colleague, Susanna Smith. She is our ever hardworking media coordinator at the Commission. Over to you, James, I think, and then, Commissioner, you want to start?
Yeah, I think I'll start with regard to the last question from Katlego. So I think to make two distinctions, Katlego, there are remedial actions and there are recommendations. The remedial actions are those that we propose, at least at this juncture, in relation to participants, stakeholders in the space. Whereas recommendations are those that we propose in relation to government, as you would have seen. So that's how the law is currently framed. So we make recommendation to third-party stakeholder participants and recommendation to government. However, I also want to make another distinction, which is, as I said earlier, that these are at the moment provisional remedial actions. And James has explained the reason we do that is we've made provisional findings and proposed remedial actions. And once we have engaged with participants, and it could be media, the media in South Africa, or it could be the platforms themselves, who could come up with some evidence to show that some of the findings we have made actually are not supported by some evidence, in which case we may have to amend those findings, and thus the proposed remedial action. So those are the two distinctions we seek to make in today's presentation, and I hope that is helpful. Thank you. James?
Thank you, and I don't know how to bring Paula in from the virtual space if she wants to add, but let me try to deal with some of these. So just on the large and small, and Udi, so that was Kadlego's question, and also Udi's around lower barriers to entry to the media. I mean, there's definitely about the general fairness and also addressing the harm that is posed to competition for digital advertising. But there are specific measures that seek to ensure media diversity, and also that the public broadcaster, who plays such an important role in that, is part of the process, because they have been excluded from some of the informal negotiations that have happened in the past. So as we indicated, looking at a fund, the criticism of a fund has been that this predominantly benefits the mainstream media and the incumbent media. And so the recommendation that we have put forward, and where we would want further submissions, is that the fund, in essence, you could say, split into three. One focuses on content and online content. Another focuses on need. So it may be that some of the bigger mixed media houses with broadcasting along with print have not been impacted as hard as others, and therefore have less need, or where they lead the race in subscriptions, online subscriptions might be another example. And then lastly, about the contribution to media diversity. And the point was well made by the Reuters Institute during the public hearings of how, in fact, I think he referred to examples in Nordic countries where, in fact, you're looking to support even startups and those at community level. There are also other initiatives around vernacular and community media that are very specific to boost on search. And part of our approach to social media has been, because social media is so important to community and vernacular media. So there is an element of also ensuring competition between the media. And if you look at our terms of reference, it's partly about the inequity in bargaining power, but then also competition on the platforms. And this is where the bias towards YouTube, towards foreign media, is evident that it must be addressed as well, and certainly on search against smaller media. So it is to address both. Veeral, in terms of your question and the risk, I mean, we do hear obviously a lot of bluster coming from across the Atlantic. I think where we have to be clear is we do have a right to regulate the behavior of these companies according to our law and the Competition Act, and even more so because of the constitutional rights. We also have the power to impose binding remedies. And I think for most of these companies, the option of simply exiting South Africa is not really an option. We still represent a desirable market where they earn good revenues. What we have done is, after clearly seeing that some of the media bargaining has resulted in these unintended consequences, we've looked for a win-win type solution. And what we actually think is that this is an opportunity for Google, Meta, and others to, in fact, look at whether South Africa as a testing ground offers alternatives to the simple pay and don't resolve the issues. And so we actually think that because we're giving these alternatives, they should be interested, because this issue is not going away around the world. And at the moment, there's one solution out there, and we're offering an alternative solution. It may be mixed with some payment earlier, but it's about finding sustainable long-term traffic that can be allow for the media to earn money in the process. And interestingly, you know, when Mark Zuckerberg announced community notes, he also announced that in that context there may be more scope for political and news content on the platform. So, and even Meta is forced to do some deals with media because they now have Meta AI, which is not just putting something in your feed, it's responding to a query. So I think there's a lot of incentives, I would say, for them to actually engage seriously about what are these alternatives and can it be win-win. And that's the idea behind offering a remedy that does differ and looks for a long-term solution. I mean, even X, you know, we're looking at changes to the deprioritization of posts with links, and that's for the news media. We're not saying that this must be for everyone, because our focus is on the news media. That was their policy till 2 years ago. And if you remove that for the news media alone, it's not changing the entire revenue model for X. It does allow a more focused opportunity. So we would think they would be foolish not to engage some of these. And as I said, it offers an alternative to the current focus, which is purely on pay. But you're right, it is a carrot and stick. So the levy, a digital levy or tariff, and a tariff has become feasible now in terms of World Trade Organization rules, is in a sense a fallback. If there is litigation, hostility, then the recommendation that is implemented by government is not implemented by the media. It is a direction that Australia started to look at, but it does mean that there's no incentive to completely eliminate news on Facebook, because you're going to be taxed regardless. And that's why it is that. But if we can find the sustainable win-win long-term solutions, then that is the preferred. I think it's preferred for the media too, because it offers a more stability through that. So in terms of online question about how likely. I mean, in the last online intermediation inquiry, we reached agreement with Google on far-reaching remedies that did have a cost for them, but some of them they also took on board and have rolled out globally, in fact, seeing the value of some of the kind of remedies for their own business and for the value that it gets from some of the countries. We also have agreements with Booking.com and other global firms, and I think it is a reality. We obviously have the power to impose a binding remedy. The parties would have the option of an appeal if they so wished, but that is on the record of the inquiry and the evidence that had been placed before the inquiry. But often we can find these mutually beneficial solutions. I think the approach the Commission has adopted in dealing with digital markets through inquiries as opposed to through regulation, as we see in the EU, is that we provide a lot more scope for, in fact, finding each other and finding those solutions that are win-win rather than hardening attitudes and resulting in litigation and hardening attitudes. And that, I think, for business and regulators is always a preferred option to find a solution that can resolve what are, I think, commonly accepted problems. I think the platforms, at least in the public hearings, were honest to say that the media plays an important role in democracy. It is in a crisis, and they are not going to produce the content that resolves that issue. And so I think for some of them, and even the good faith negotiations that Google has already undertaken with the mainstream media and with the Association of Independent Publishers, indicates that there is a willingness, I think, to engage, and I respect Google for that. Thanks.
Thank you very much, James. I know you have offered Ospola an opportunity to make additions, if any, but I do wish to just allow the two last questions before she comes in. Susanna?
Thank you so much. Wish to acknowledge that Tech Central also posed a similar question around the US. One additional question from William from Media24. He asks, how did the Commission estimate the revenue that Google receives from news content in South Africa? He believes the 800 million to 900 million revenue figure is much greater than what Google had presented. And then just finally, an echo from a YouTube viewer that the remedies must be open and transparent and compensate for the loss of income. That concludes the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susanna. James, you will guide us on how we tackle.
So it seems obviously we support transparency and openness, and I think even the AIP in the deal they've done and the fund they intend to run has that transparency built in. We've also recommended other provisions around compensation, such as obviously being a South African news media organization primarily focused on South Africa, but also being part of the regulatory oversight bodies as well. In terms of the estimate of revenue, it is correct. Google presented a number of around 35 million based on ad revenue that was earned purely on news queries. But we know that most of the ad revenue is generated on commercial queries, not just news queries. Our estimate looks at the value, the entire Google search platform gets from being able to answer news queries and become an authoritative source for search and a preferred destination for consumers who might otherwise, even for their commercial search, go to one of these specialist search engines or specialist sites, such as for travel or for shopping. So many consumers started Google because of that habituated use of Google, and on your phone it's also a default. And news contributes substantially to that. So as Paula indicated, 10 to 15% of queries on search are news queries, raising a news response, so not open to to some debate about whether this is news or not, it raises either the top stories on Google or the news carousel on Bing. So our estimate is based on 10 to 15% of queries, means 10 to 15% of revenue is validly associated with the value. And so that number is based on 10 to 15% of the overall value that Google earns from advertising revenue for its search business as well. As Paula indicated, there is also, in addition to that, value destroyed where there's no clicks and no advertising revenue earned. And so we've incorporated that as well. But the report has a lot of detail about the methodologies we're employing, and these are the things that are subject to engagement. I know in the public hearings and through the submissions, there was a lot of engagement about how you determine value. And as we pointed out in the report, and one can go and when you have time to look, see that we've considered submissions from the media around that and their estimates. They were considerably higher, and we put that up for public comment on the website. Google was considerably lower, and so probably the truth lies somewhere in between. And this is our way of estimating. We think it's logical. It's based on actual data, sound data, which is an advantage. You know, the problem with a lot of the bargaining approaches is a lack of information. And I know the media has looked to do PIA requests from Google to get that information without success. But that is the advantage of an inquiry. We can get that information and make an expert assessment. And certainly I would applaud the technical team for doing exactly that.
Paula, any additions?
Thank you very much. Yes, absolutely. I wanted to just reiterate what James said, that this is a very comprehensive report, and the technical team have put together annexures that really back up with evidence the findings, but also the recommendations. And so I would really just urge the media to start a public conversation, and within the next 6 weeks, while we're open for comments, to engage with the issues, engage with the report, engage with the findings, the provisional findings and recommendations, so that we can actually engage the public on what the value of media is in a constitutional democracy, and then with the final report to actually have that input in it. So thank you very much, James.
Thank you very much, Paula. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our briefing session, and on behalf of the Commissioner, I would like to thank Commissioner, the technical team, for making this possible, especially under the circumstances that we had to traverse earlier. Commissioner, I was hoping that we are going to extend in person a congratulatory message to the newly elected chairperson of SANEF, Makhudu Sifara. But now that the delegation is here, I'm sure they will extend that congratulatory message to Makhudu. Ladies and gentlemen, as per the norm, we would arrest James as I allow other members of the commission for the one-on-ones. There's also a technical team that is available to take some of the questions. Thank you very much for your patience. We know we ran a little bit late earlier, but we thank you for your indulgence. The media briefing is officially adjourned. Thank you.